Hello friends, I am Dr. Kuldeep Mohadikar. In this video, I will present my 31st chapter from my series Literary Pearls. The chapter is entitled as Robert Browning's Philosophy of Life. Browning is one of the greatest philosophic poets of Victorian age. Browning did not identify himself with particular school of philosophy, but he was a great Victorian thinker, a sympathetic attitude towards all science, progress, and mental activity and injury of his times. His poetry is blended with philosophical thoughts. In his poems, he has given certain defined convictions about God, the soul, and the man's future. He considers God as supreme master of human being and creatures. He says that nature is vivid as a thought of a God. Also, he adds, God is the perfect poet. So, the whole universe is a crystal thought of God to the poet. God dwells in all from life's minute beginnings up at last to man, Browning says. As Frederick Rayland calls Browning a philosophic poet. In his poetry, he offers a distinct theory of relation of man to the universe, exhibits this theory by means of imaginary characters and scenes. Some critics says that Browning's optimism is blind, but on the contrary, his optimism is not blind. He does not shut his eyes to the sufferings and evils that in the life. It is not a cheap optimism, it is founded on the realities of life. Browning knows, says Compton Rickett, I quote, that human life is a bewildering mixture of good and evil, of the fault lovely and the ugly, of despair and imperfections of life. I unquote. Browning, the healthiest and manliest of all poets, is intensely optimistic in life. No lover of Browning's poetry can miss the vigorous manliness of the poet's own bearing or fail to recognize the strength that flows from a joyous, fearless personality and the might of his intellect and heart. He conveyed the depth of the joyous meaning which the poet found in the world. He had the invaluable endowment to see the sunny side of life. I find earth not grey, but rosy heaven not green, but fair office do I stoop, I pluck a posy. Do I stand and stare, all is blue. All this is said by Browning. Browning thus is an optimist to the core. Like Carlyle, he preaches a doctrine of strenuous endeavor. He is not a mere ascetic. He finds all things good. The virtue is the best. Imperfection and failure are man's glory. The ideals which soul illumines are beacons in the far distance. For the man who strives for a noble ideal, there is no failure. The very effect is fulfillment, his triumph. The other firmly base of Browning's optimism is the immortality of the soul. He believes that man lives in two worlds, the infinite and finite. He thinks that the body may die, but soul lives in the infinite. He could never believe that death extinguishes the divine spark. He says about human life, I quote, God the potter and soul is clay, I unquote. Both of them endure, forever endeavor. This faith of the poet expressed in Rabi Ben Izra. I quote, full, all that is all last ever past, recall earth changes, but the soul and God stand for sure. Times which run back or sports, potter and clay endure. So I unquote. Browning has pointed out his regards for body and soul. This led him to believe there is something significance or signification of human life and world is good place because it had many good things like religion, nationalism, society, family and love. Above all, this world is a valley of soul making. What is the aim of human life? Every good thinker of this world has to answer of one question. What is the aim of life and end of life? For which object have we been sent to the earth? Browning faced this question squarely, and he says in Grammarian's Funeral, I quote, "This high man with a good thing to pursue dies ere he knows it what low man goes on adding one to one. His 100 soon hit. This high man aiming at 1,000,000 misses at what? I unquote." Browning says there are two types of people in this world: low man with small ambitions and noble people like Grammarian with high ambition. The some men whose ambition are small and whose aims are limited and achieve it with a little efforts. On the other hand, noble person like the Grammarian have lofty ambition. Their ideals are so high that they die even before achieve their aims. A low man likes person who wants only soon. He makes efforts, earn it little by little, and soon get whatever he wants. On the other hand, a noble person like Grammarian aims at 100 rupees but at 1 million, but his life and before he has achieved a single unit. Failure of this kind is, according to Professor Henry Jones, has, if I quote, the last word but one. It is expressed in different word in Andrea del Sarto. I quote, "Ah, but a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what heaven for?" I unquote. The value of the life does not depend upon the success or failure, but on the nature of the struggle and nature of the ideal. The true man is faulty, aware of evil and imperfections, and therefore he sets before himself the ideal of perfection. This attitude of Browning shows his robust optimism. Thus, Browning thinks that this world is essentially good. Whatever miseries and sorrow are there in it are due to the imperfection of man and presence of evil, which stand in the way of his goal. Man tries here to achieve perfection by struggling against false imperfection and evil. He may not victorious from the tough fight, but at least he become aware of perfection present in the mind of man. This is enough to make him forward and rise. Thus Browning views, as Young puts it, that the whole world of life, the whole purpose of love which gave it birth, lies not in perfection but in the efforts to become perfect. Man must struggle and strive to come as close to the attainment of his life as possible. Man was sent for struggle and fight with difficulties. In Rabbi ben Ezra, he gave advice, I quote, "Youth should strive through acts uncouth towards making," I unquote. Browning believes that man has not judged by his actual attainments but by his noble ideals and his efforts to achieve success in life. In God's view, success was not the yardstick to judge a man's earthly life. The faith of the poet expressed in Rabbi ben Ezra, I quote, "Not on the vulgar mass called work must sentence pass, things done that took eyes and has the prize," I unquote. Failure on the earth was not in any way an object of dismay. For what we fail to achieve the world, we might succeed in heaven after the end of journey on the earth. And what is failure here but triumphs, evidence for the fullness of the day? The lover in The Last Ride Together gives a spirit's defense of failure of in life. I quote, "Fail I alone in the world and deeds, why all men strive and who succeeds? Look at the end of work contrast, the poetry done, the undone vast." I unquote. Life is probation, life succeeds life. Man's soul is immortal. Death did to frighten us. He would attain what man failed to achieve in this world in the next. That was Browning's faith and hope, and in Grammarian's Funeral he says, I quote, "Live how to dogs and apes man has forever," I unquote. So this was all about Browning's philosophy of life. Thanks, friends.